Merry Christmas, 007.
Welcome. My name is John, and I'm just here to discuss movies on the YT. And if you'd like to join that discussion, go ahead and smash that subscribe button and hit that notification bell as well. And today, we are talking about On Her Majesty's Secret Service, the one and only Bond movie that stars George Lazenby. Now, for a background, I actually kind of started this YouTube channel to document my first reactions and reviews of my first watchings and first viewings of the James Bond movies leading up to No Time to Die, because it was really the only major action franchise or even like modern spy franchise that I hadn't seen the movies of. And so I just felt like it was about time, and it was just a nice way to keep me on track. But then No Time to Die got delayed, and so I kind of stopped doing that. And I don't think I'm going to continue reviewing individual movies, at least in a review series like that. But I am probably going to rank all of the actors and eras leading up to No Time to Die. And I did make it through all of the Eon Connery movies in the review series. Sean Connery does an amazing job with James Bond in the movies he's in. And I'm a fan of 5 out of the 7 James Bond movies he does. And he's brought so much to the role and is so iconic and influential within the spy genre. But the one movie that hit me harder than all of the previous Bond movies I saw, and I have seen a couple of the first couple Roger Moore movies as well, since I have done that review series, but the one movie that hit me harder than all of them was On Her Majesty's Secret Service. I was just floored by how much I loved this movie, simply because I wasn't expecting it to be as good, or I wasn't expecting to love it as much as I did. And it's basically set around Christmas time, so I figured, why not re-review it? And what better time to talk about it than the present? And I feel like I've wasted plenty of time already, so let's get started. First, talking about the action. I think this movie does a brilliant job with its action, especially in the second half of the movie, when you have what I think is a very well executed, especially for the 60s, a very well executed avalanche sequence. And I even really enjoyed the car chase. I was a big fan of the car chase, especially once they get onto the race car track. And I just think the action in general is very well executed in this movie. And I think the first half of the movie does a great job building up tension, so you can have kind of the payoff of the big action sequences in the second half. That being said, if I was to nitpick something, I'd say that the final bobsled sequence with Blofeld was a little anticlimactic, but that's very, very nitpicky of me, and I'm probably not going to hold the score against that. And so moving on to the acting and the characters. So performance-wise, I'd be inclined to say that I prefer Sean Connery's Bond. That being said, I prefer the characterization of the George Lazenby Bond, because I feel like, in my opinion, he has more development in this one movie than Sean Connery's Bond had in all 6, or if you include Never Say Never Again, all 7. And I think from the get-go, you realize that George Lazenby has a good grasp of the character, especially when he says the line that this would never happen to the other guy right before the opening credits start. I just think it's a nice, brilliant way to open this movie, and it just kind of grabs you right there and keeps you for the rest of the movie. And then you also have Contessa, who I think is very well acted, and I think has great chemistry with Lazenby's Bond, and she's easily probably my favorite Bond girl from the movies that I have seen. And I think even Moneypenny has some nice, small emotional development in this movie, where at the beginning of the movie, she's just her usual flirting with Bond, like her usual self that you see in the other movies. And then by the end, she's kind of, I don't know, accepting or whatever of Bond being with like another woman or whatever. It's hard to describe, I guess, but I just kind of like how there's little tiny things like that thrown into this movie. And moving on to the visuals, I think this movie has awesome production design, and I think it's shot fairly well. I don't necessarily think it's shot as well as like Goldfinger, but I mean, I still think this is still shot extremely well. And something I don't think I noticed the first time I watched this is some of the lighting techniques they use, because even when they're in different environments, there's like this red lamp light that they show, whether it's like the beginning at the casino hotel, or even when you get into Blofeld's lair, there's like these red lamp type lights shining. And I didn't notice it before, I guess, but I just thought that just those nice little small touches like that added just a nice visual aesthetic to the movie, as well as just the production design in general of especially like Blofeld's lair and the Piz Gloria. And now, moving on to the story and the writing. I mentioned this a little bit in the acting and characters section, but I love the character development between Bond and Contessa in this movie. And I just think it helps add to just a very, kind of spoiler alert here, but it adds to a very heartbreaking ending, in my opinion, that kind of floored me. And one thing I think that helps with that heartbreaking ending is the fact that this is the one and only Lazenby film. So you think maybe they'll let this version of James Bond just ride off happily ever after into the sunset. And then all of a sudden, that ending comes and it just kind of floors you. And so I think the fact that this is the only Lazenby Bond movie helps with that factor. And something I forgot to mention in the characters section, he almost reminds me a little more of Ethan Hunt in this movie than he does the Sean Connery James Bond. Because of the relationship he has with Contessa, it reminds me of Ethan Hunt and his wife, especially in like Mission Impossible 3, which might be my personal favorite of that franchise, but that's a different video. So there was something that I complained about a little bit in my first review, but it was not as big of an issue for me this time around, and that was the time that he spent as Sir Hilary in Blofeld's facility and the flirting with those women. In the first movie, it almost felt like he was, I don't know if it's the right term to use, but cheating on Contessa in a way. But this time around, I don't know if it's because I was more accepting of it or whatever, but it felt more like he was just doing it to get info, even though, there's some stuff in there. But it felt a little more like that to me this time around. And I also think this movie, the pacing of this movie is actually very decently done. It is a longer Bond movie than most of the earlier Bond films, but I still think it's paced very well, and they do a great job building up tension through the first half to add to a very action-packed second half. And then lastly, moving on to the sound. I absolutely love the score to this movie. I don't think it's quite as good as Goldfinger's score, but this is probably my second favorite James Bond score. I love the score. I've listened to it quite a few times, actually, since I first watched this movie. And I even think Louis Armstrong's We Have All the Time in the World, even though it's not quite as Bond song-ish as most Bond songs, because it has a different title and everything, it has a different title than the movie. But I think it works really well, especially the moments that they use it. And even the sound design I thought was very well done, as they are pretty much with all of these Bond movies, at least the ones that I have seen. So overall, on Her Majesty's Secret Service Even though I was recently introduced to it, it's quickly becoming one of my favorite spy movies, one of my favorite even action movies, and it's now become one of my favorite Christmas movies, as Blofeld's plot does revolve around his kind of cult members, if you want to call it a cult, going home for Christmas and dispersing, stuff through Christmas presents. Especially when you get to the action-packed second half, there are a lot of Christmas aesthetic elements that add to it. I forgot to mention that earlier, but so even though I was recently introduced to this movie, it's quickly become one of my favorite spy movies, one of my favorite action movies, one of my favorite Christmas movies even, and I've just grown to love it even more than I originally did the first time I watched it. And I'm actually probably going to give it a slightly higher score than I initially did. And I think it's the second time I've given a score this high. And some people might think this is too high of a score, but personally I think On Her Majesty's Secret Service deserves an APAP, and as perfect as possible, because there is no such thing as a perfect movie. 5 out of 5. Thanks for watching this video. If you love On Her Majesty's Secret Service, or even if you hate it, I'd love to hear your thoughts on why in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, if you enjoyed this review, go ahead and smash that thumbs up icon and smash that subscribe button and hit that notification bell as well to stay up to date on my future videos. I've been having a blast doing YouTube, and I'll probably continue to do it through at least the first part of next year. And there's a lot of spy movies coming out next year, especially in that first little third. So there will probably be a lot of spy movie content, at least at the beginning of next year. So if that intrigues you, go ahead and smash that thumbs up button and stay up to date on my videos. And always remember that we have all the time in the world.